Welcome to a brand new episode of the All Hoops podcast. I'm your host, Steve Inman, joined as always by producer to the stars and co-host Chris Brito. Down the stretch we go on this NBA season with the All-Star break in the books. Chris and I will explain what has happened to the Knicks, to the Lakers, and break down some of the most interesting storylines to watch the rest of the regular season and this summer. Before we get to all that, Chris, my friend, how are you?
Hey, Stevie, happy to be here in another episode of the All Hoops podcast. There's a lot to cover with the Knicks, and I think we finally met a breaking point now that the Knicks I think there's a lot to be left desired for the team. I think we had a lot of high expectations going in. We thought they were going to be a playoff team, and I think it's becoming abundantly clear that the team is nowhere near that. And I think it's a very, very hard truth to swallow, but it doesn't seem like the team knows that it should be tanking for the rest of the season.
No, and we've had this conversation before. We probably had this, this is our fifth season of All Hoops. We probably had this conversation 4 of the 5 years where they're kind of in no man's land. They're not good enough for the playoffs, but they're not bad enough to get a top pick. And right now they're 12th in the East. They are 4 games behind Charlotte for the number 10 seed. And you're talking about competing for a 10 seed. You're talking about a chance to get another chance to get to the playoffs, to get blown out by the Bucks or Philly. So they're just going nowhere, and it's upsetting to see because there are some young players here. It's some players we really want to see more of. And this was my big fear with Thibodeau, which was he wasn't going to play the young guys enough. He wasn't going to be a developmental coach. And we kind of threw that away, right? It was, it doesn't matter. He's a great winner. He's a New Yorker. He grinds out games, and they overachieved last year. And now this is kind of what we expected last year for this year. And it seems like last year was the outlier, right? Not this year. They look like they're back to being a 32-win team, and just you're in the middle of nowhere, no man's land. We were talking about where they are in the lottery standings. Right now, they're like 7th or 8th, and they have a 20% chance of getting into that top 4. So, Chris, where should they go the rest of the year?
I mean, the easiest answer to that question is they're not good enough to be a playoff team that'll last more than a single round, right? And I think moving forward with this team, you need to start playing your young players, man. You need to have Deuce McBride. He doesn't have to start, but he should be getting minutes just to evaluate what we have on this team right now. And, as currently constructed, you tell me, we don't even know what we have out of some of these young guys. We're just really now starting to play Jericho Sims more. And he plays 10, 15 minutes.
That's only because Noel is hurt too.
And I think it's such a disservice as this team is transitioning even to the next level to see what you have with these players. I think the most prudent thing is to play these guys and see what they're made of. If they're no good, okay. Not like with Kevin Knox, where it literally took 3 seasons to evaluate what we had in him, and Frank Ntilikina as well. So I think it's a big mistake to not play these young guys. And I know I'm stating the obvious. All these Knicks fans are saying the same thing. The one bright spot I will say is that RJ Barrett has clearly gone to another level in his game. And I think while the season has been a bust, seeing him improve right before our eyes, he had 46 the other night. I think it's just very encouraging because we started out his rookie season unsure of what we had in him. You said blasphemous things like, oh, you wish you had Tyler Hero instead of him.
I don't anymore, for the record. But if you look at Tyler Hero's numbers compared to Barrett, Tyler Hero still has better numbers this year. We don't talk about that. But I'd rather have Barrett. But let's not make it seem like that was quote unquote blasphemous.
Anyway, I think moving forward, obviously the Knicks need to see what they have in McBride. They should either start quickly or they need to put Burks in the bench. We know he's a vet. We know what we have in him. He's not going to be the future starting point guard of this team. It's time to move on.
Look, I mean, Burks has been a nice player, and I think he's a very good eighth man on a solid team. And we got into the playoffs last year, and Rose was out of gas. They figured out Randall. Barrett was up and down. Burks was arguably your second best player behind Derrick Rose, you know? So he's still an important part of this team. That doesn't mean, though, we have to teach a 30-year-old backup shooting guard how to be a starting point guard. It doesn't make sense. Give McBride a chance. Give him 15 games, see if he's anything. Is he a starting point guard? Is he a backup? Is he a defensive guy who can't score? So I don't really get the whole, we have to squeeze out every win we can, which has not helped them this season. And it obviously doesn't help them next season. So my question there, Chris, is should they fire Thibodeau and find a player development coach?
I think Thibs deserves some benefit of the doubt. I think a lot of this season was going to hang on whether Derrick Rose was going to play major minutes, and I think that really threw this team out, right, out of sync. So I think you head toward next season with him as the coach. I think more important than finding a new coach is having stability. And I think we've lacked stability in this organization for a very long time. And I think right now that trumps finding a coach that could be a player development coach, I guess. I still think Thibs could be the guy. And I think he gets some benefit of the doubt for leading us into the playoffs last year.
I just think if this team is going to do anything, it's because of the young players. And that means either those guys get good and become core pieces of this team, like Quickly and Toppin and McBride, or those guys are good enough to be thrown into a trade for the next superstar who wants out. And right now you have neither. You can't trade, McBride, Toppin, and Quickly and get a Donovan Mitchell, Bradley Beal, Zion Williamson type player, because those guys just haven't played enough. They haven't shown that they're legit starting players in the NBA. And you got to figure those things out. Because, it's not like they can hide those guys and people go, oh my God, they might be really good. Teams assume that if you're not playing your own guys, it's because they can't play. And I just don't want that to be the case. I think they should just give it a chance. They're not going anywhere this year, as we keep saying. Give these guys some reps. Let's see if any of these guys are keepers for next year, because that's where we're looking at now.
See, my thing with even McBride, right? I think he is exactly what you're sort of looking for in a point guard that can be a disruptor on defense. Maybe his offensive game needs a little bit more refining, but he's the exact type of point guard that we need right now. I mean, even if he were on the bench, I think having someone like him could do wonders. Sims, we've had Nerlens Noel injured for most of the season, yet we elected to pick Taj Gibson to play minutes that could have gone to Jericho Sims
or Obi Toppin.
It makes it. I don't see the logic there, but it kind of is what it is at this point. And the Knicks have lost 15 of the last 18, and so clearly something is not working. It's the same players are playing, but something is not working.
Once again, the Knicks' success will come down to getting lucky in the lottery, and they have not gotten lucky in the lottery for more often than not. So,
I will say I did miss not having the lottery last year and watching it with you, Stevie.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to doing that again this year, of course. Let's move on. The Lakers, who don't have a lottery pick, that pick is going to New Orleans, are also really bad. They're in a bad spot right now. LeBron James is basically threatening to leave the team with a year and a half left on his deal. Anthony Davis is hurt again. Russell Westbrook is just a mess right now. I was at the game the other day, and the first 2.5 quarters, he had 8 turnovers, no assists, and they lose by 30. They're throwing the ball into the crowd. You see LeBron getting into it with the fans. And Chris, can this be salvaged here? They've lost 14 of 20.
It just really depends on whether LeBron James can mend that relationship with the Lakers front office. I think the reports have sort of indicated there's a divide right now between Clutch Sports, the group that represents LeBron James, and the Lakers front office. And so if they don't resolve that before the offseason or in the offseason, I mean, realistically, where can you see LeBron James though? I mean, he wants to be in a big market. Would you see him going back to the Cavs? Would you see him going to play with the Clippers?
What
Like,
I see him doing is spending one last year in LA, demanding them use their picks to flip Westbrook's contract for a third guy, maybe a wing who can really help LeBron and AD. If that works and they're successful, I see him finishing his career in LA. You know, if it doesn't work, I think he's just gonna bounce around, and I'm curious how this all plays out, because now you're talking about he wants to play with his son. I've asked people, is he a guy who is a first round pick? Is he a lottery guy? And they're basically like, he was the fourth best player on his high school team this year. And he's probably a early to mid second round pick. And if you're promised a year of LeBron, does that bump him up to the lottery? Does it bump him up to the top 20, top 10? So we just got to hear more of like, is LeBron saying, hey, I'll show up in Bronny James's fourth year for my final year? Or is he saying, hey, if you draft Bronny Jr., I will be there right away? And I think those are two very different things that will drastically change Bronny James's NBA future.
I sort of hate that for Bronny Jr. because your stock is going to be impacted by your dad. And I feel like.
But it can only be impacted in a good way.
Will it?
I mean, nobody's going to be like, I'm not drafting Bronny
Jr.
because I don't want LeBron James.
No, that's not why. I mean, it's basically, Austin Rivers went through bullying when he started in the NBA because his dad was a coach. And when he played on the Clippers, he was also teased by fellow players. So
that could definitely hurt him.
That's
in terms of draft stock, he's going to go from a guy who's going to be an early second round pick to a guy a guaranteed 4-year deal.
I mean, it definitely won't hurt his draft stock, but if I'm LeBron James, I sort of want to stay as much out of it as possible. But LeBron James is one of those few individuals that sort of don't abide by any rules by the rest of us humans. So, but meanwhile, the whole Lakers situation.
You saw the Ball brothers with LeVar, though. I mean, he was talking all these things, and they're going to be so great, and all these things, and both of his talented kids, 2 of the 3, won the top 3 of the draft. So I don't think it really killed anything, even though they probably got bullied with it too.
I mean, the thinking here is just that Bronny Jr. is going to have to he's going to have to fend for himself in the NBA. I mean, after he gets drafted, because he will get drafted. I mean, it's inevitable.
Yeah.
I just fear that it'll be a lot of pressure for him as a young player in this league that, is cutthroat. It very much is. So it's just one of those things that I hope it works itself out, but we're years away from that situation anyway. But I want to bring it back to the Lakers, who were blown out by the New Orleans Pelicans the other night. And you were at the game. So my question to you is, there was a lot going on in the game. The Lakers are clearly playing bad. Westbrook had more than 8 turnovers, I think. Is this the point where you realize that the Lakers are just not going to be better than a play-in team?
I think we're there. I do. It's unfortunate right now. They're 9. They are, 2-3 games up on Portland for the last spot, right? If you got them in a play-in, and you have LeBron James and Anthony Davis invested and healthy, I like their chances of getting to the playoffs. But I just don't see them as a real threat this year. I think I don't think LeBron can carry a team for 5-6 weeks the way he could. And they are free falling, and they got to figure out what to do with Westbrook. Do they just send him home? I think I would at this point. And their role players just aren't good. I mean, Austin Reeves is probably one of their better guys. He was an undrafted, Caruso light type player. They never got a thing out of Malik Monk. I'm sorry, Malik Monk's been okay. They never got anything out of the Heat kid. I'm blanking on the name right now. You know who I'm talking about. He was with the Heat the last few years, undrafted. They thought he was going to be pretty good. They gave him $5 million. That didn't work. They brought in DeAndre Jordan. That didn't work. They already waived him. Their role players just aren't good enough. And if Davis doesn't come back at 100% and play at an
Kendrick
MVP level,
Nunn.
Kendrick Nunn, thank you. That was going to drive me crazy all day. If this team is just not good enough. It's unfortunate, but that's just where they're at. And I think they got to regroup this summer and find a way to get that third star. I wonder, like, could they trade both their first round picks and Westbrook if Bradley, in a sign and trade, if Bradley Beal said, hey, get me to LA? Could that work? Because to me, that's the only way I could see the Lakers really getting that third star, where you're giving up like multiple picks. Wow. I don't think it's a good enough offer. If you're
why would Washington do that after Westbrook? They would not do that.
I don't think they would either. They would have better offers. But if Bradley Beal says, hey, I'm leaving, he's gonna be a free agent this summer. Bradley Beal.
I think what you do instead, though, try to involve the Knicks. We trade Julius somewhere. We'll take whatever picks and whatever, and we'll take the salary cap space and find a way to get Russell Westbrook here, because it'll be only 1 year of his contract here.
I like the idea. Bobby Marks is bringing it up. Like, you trade like Fournier, Noel, and Kemba, like these 3 deals you don't really want, and you get Westbrook and their future 2027 first round pick.
Yeah.
Can you do that this summer? I think you could. You give Westbrook his like one final chance as a lead guard in the NBA. If he's good, maybe he can carry the Knicks to 40 wins. And if he's not good, he's an expiring contract. You send him home, and then, hey, you're probably a bad team anyway. So I like the idea. And I would, if I were the Knicks, that would be my plan B behind like convincing Bradley Beal to somehow come here. So interesting stuff. And I can see the Knicks and Lakers being intertwined this summer for sure. As they often are, but let's get to our final thoughts right after this. Okay, Chris, final thoughts time here. We're going to play a little game called Boom or Bust. We got a couple of really cool statements, and you're going to tell me whether they're true or false. Boom or bust, Zion Williamson will never play for the Pelicans ever again.
I'm going to have to go with boom on that one. I still think, I know, controversial. I think if I'm Zion Williamson and I'm seeing how the Pelicans have improved the team, having 20-point victories over the Lakers and really revitalized the team with the McCollum trade, right? Like, you could argue that, okay, Zion might be the best player, but Ingram's like right there, and McCollum is like also right there.
So are you saying he is coming back?
Yeah, I think he is coming back to the Pelicans.
I said, boom, he's never going to play for them again. You said, yes, he's never going to play for them again. So I was confused.
Oh, I thought boom was yes.
All boom right. Is yes.
So yes, he will play with them again.
Okay. The question was, will he not play with them again? But okay. I'm going to go the other way. I don't think he's ever playing for them again. I think it's a boom. He doesn't want to be there. He's made that very clear. He's always injured. And if I'm David Griffin, this is the best way to save my job. I'm going to say, hey, I'm trading him for all the picks, all the young players. I'm going to push back my timetable 2-3 years. And I think this is the best way to save his job this summer. I don't think they're going to get a great deal for him either, because desperate GMs rarely do, but that's just where they're at. And I think it's going to be a huge blockbuster deal this summer.
And I can't wait to find out what the story was.
We may never know, because this to me reminds me of Kawhi with the Spurs. And we never really figured out why that blew up. Like, we never did. Like, he didn't trust their doctors or something, but it just never made sense. He played 9 games that year after being an MVP candidate the year before. And then they really got, 40 cents on the dollar for him. They got 1 first-round pick, which became, and Jacob Puddle with DeMar DeRozan. And like, you would have got 3 times that if that was, today. And so it's super interesting. And moving on now, very good thing from the Bill Simmons podcast, where he was very confident that Seattle and Vegas would get expansion teams within the next couple of years. So I'm going to say boom or bust. Boom meaning yes, bust meaning no. The NBA will expand in the next 5 years.
I have to go with boom on that one, meaning yes. Mainly because there seems to be this growing market for Vegas, which I don't know. Like, I think Vegas was cool because it was one of the few places where you could just gamble freely. And it is for a lot of states. So it'll still obviously get a lot of tourists. But I don't know, man. I don't know if that's such a great idea in Vegas, but it's inevitable. I mean, we have seen the success that the Aces have had there, the Golden Knights there. I think, having them back in Seattle is obviously a great and popular thing to do. I feel like we see posts on like, NBA fan pages of, oh, remember when the team was in Seattle and whatnot. So, it's just one of those things that like you hope. And it's also, there's just so much talent in the league right now. I mean, you could argue that you can make one or two teams built off some of the guys in the G League. So, our league is in a good place where we can add 2 more expansion teams and be okay.
Yeah, I'm going to go boom as well. I just believe there, as you said correctly, there's just so much talent in the league. We haven't had this much talent in the league since like the 90s. And then what did they do there? They expanded. It was a smaller league then. So obviously, you expand and then the talent pool dilutes. And we haven't really had an opportunity to expand like that since the early 90s. So I'm with it. I think it's the right thing to do. And everything I hear is it's going to be Seattle and Vegas. And Seattle is always choice number 1 by everybody, including people in the NBA. And it's interesting because, they took that team away for a reason. Like, yes, they need a new arena and all these things, but like they took the team away. And basically ever since they took it away, there's been talk about putting it back. And that seems weird to me, but at the same time, I'm with it. Players are with it. And I think them in Vegas would be awesome.
So why did you bring that up? That there must be a reason why they took it away? Because I thought the stadium issue was the biggest issue.
The stadium issue is the biggest issue, but when you have an NBA franchise, it takes so much to lose it. So much. It's more than just a stadium, and that's my thought on that, but we'll have to wait and see. I hope it does happen. I think it'll be a lot of fun to see an expansion draft and see who's protected, who's not, and whatnot. But moving on, boom or bust, the Knicks will have a quality point guard next year.
I really hope so, Stevie. What about I go boom?
All right, I'm going to say boom too. Let's be optimistic. I think, they're free falling in this draft. Maybe you can fall away to get, Jaden Ivey in the top 4. He looks like a Ja Morant type athlete as a point guard. And I'm with it there. He's a guy at Purdue. So go watch him in the tournament. He's going to look like a real player for sure. And then I think there's also a pretty good chance they go after Jalen Brunson. And, he's a CAA guy. You've seen them time and time again go after their own people. And he's one of those guys. I'm not sure if he's a guy who's a huge difference maker, but he would help. And I like both of those options there. And then you never know how the NBA turns out. Maybe they wind up with Russell Westbrook for all we know. That definitely wouldn't be my first choice. All right, second to last one, boom or bust. RJ Barrett will make his first all-star team next year.
Oh, I think I'm going to have to go with boom with that one as well. It's just the trajectory that he has shown in the past year. He's averaging 28 points in like the last few games that he's played. And I'm just really encouraged by the way he's been playing recently. He just shows he's an alpha. And he got praise from Jimmy Butler the other night.
Yeah.
He scored 46 against the Heat? That's a pretty good accomplishment.
Yeah, that's a huge accomplishment for sure. I hate to be the guy, but I'm going to say bust. And I think it's just the all-star rosters are just so small that it's almost impossible to make the team if you're on a team with a losing record. And I just don't see the Knicks being a team that's going to really contend anytime soon, unless, who knows, maybe they get a Jaden Ivey and he becomes a superstar overnight. But then we're probably talking about him as an all-star versus Barrett. So I just don't see it.
My point of contention, though, is that like the New York Knicks are just one of the most popular teams in the NBA. RJ Barrett was was one of the, major selling NBA jerseys. I think it was in the top 20 this year. So the fan support will be there, and that obviously is a big chunk
The
of
fans only really vote on who starts, right?
yeah.
It's like he's not going to get picked over like Durant and Giannis and those kind of. I mean, you never know. Obviously, you never know.
You're right about that. I would just say that Knicks fans tend to be irrational.
Yes, yes. I hope you're right. I would be cool to see, especially as a guy in his early 20s, right?
So if he's averaging like 36 points.
Okay, if he's averaging 36 points, the Knicks, we will demand on this podcast all year, Knicks fans vote him in. But if he's averaging, 22 points a game on shaky shooting, he definitely looks better, but I don't know if that gets him in unless the team is over 500. So, I like what I'm seeing. At the same time, he's shooting 41% on the season. That's actually worse than last year. Like, let's pump the brakes a little bit because I think he's going to wind up being a borderline all-star next year. But let's see it happen because we've done this before with guys, and he's got to get the shooting up. He's got to do better at the free throw line.
I just want you to admit one thing, that you hate the Knicks. Just say it.
I do hate the Knicks. They've caused me enormous pain and suffering, and it's a very love-hate relationship, and nobody wants them to succeed more than I do, but I do hate the Knicks. Okay, last one. Moving on from that, Harden and Embiid. We saw them over the weekend at the Garden. They're the best duo in the NBA right now.
Oh, I'm definitely taking boom on that one. And I don't think it's even close right now. I can't think of anybody in the NBA that's better than them, unless you want to go, I don't know, John Morant and whatever guy is on the team. But
Jaren Jackson. No, I think you're right. I think it's Harden and Embiid. You can make the case for KD, Kyrie when KD's healthy.
Maybe Levine, DeRozan.
That's a good one too. Yeah. I'm going to go with Embiid and Harden too. I mean, if you saw them the other day, they hunt fouls. They're just so dangerous. You can stagger their minutes, so you always have a star on the court. Mm-hmm. I just think they're about to take off, and I think right now I would put them as the team to beat in the East. I really would.
Okay, I'll take boom on that one as well.
Love it. All right, Chris, is there anything else you have before we wrap up the show?
No, buddy. I'm just hoping the rest of the season goes by quickly so we can get into the playoffs, which is our favorite time of the year.
Yes, it is. And that is going to do it for us here at the All Hoops podcast. Thanks to Chris. Thank you for watching on YouTube or listening to the podcast, and we will talk to you soon.